I think it's important, outside of, are you thinking about working memory? Are you thinking about time blindness and dopamine and flexibility and transition times? I think overall, it's good to think about this as a constant learning and experimentation process and embrace that.
Hey, ADHD reWired listeners, real quick before we start, have you subscribed yet to the ADHD Creatives podcast with ADHD reWired coach Kristen Martz? Episode 2 came out last week. More is on the way. Go subscribe. That's the ADHD Creatives with an S podcast. Look for the green album art. Now, on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD reWired. We are welcoming back to the podcast Skye Waterson, who is an ADHD coach and the founder of Unconventional Organization, an international ADHD support service that provides research-backed support to adults with ADHD. Skye has years of experience working in adult education and has studied psychology, sociology, and public health. She was diagnosed with ADHD as a doctoral candidate before making the decision to leave her candidature. That's a fun word to say. To leave her candidature to work full-time on Unconventional Organization, which has now grown to a team of 8 ADHD coaches, online courses, and a podcast. Well, welcome back to the podcast. I know you were back, you were here on episode 449, so about a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so a couple things have changed in your life. One really big one. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I had another son. So last time I was sort of still just had my first son, and now I've had my second son just a couple of months ago.
Well, congratulations. That's very exciting, and I also know exhausting.
Yes. It's been interesting navigating and also, running a business, which is like another baby in some ways. You're sort of thinking about it a lot and then having to add, somebody to that and give people responsibility. And it's been a great process, but it's definitely been a learning curve.
So let's dive right into what we're going to talk about today. And I think it's such an important topic. It's something that I think probably all of us can relate to. So if in the event we actually have figured out how to have some kind of established routine, and then life changes and our routines change, adapting to that can be so hard.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So how has that been for you as, now you have your second child, you're running a business, like what's changed for you?
A lot, a lot. And that's why I was thinking about this idea because, especially right at the beginning, your routines just get thrown out the window because they're not your routines anymore. They're the routines of a very small newborn who has his own ideas about when you should be asleep, when you should be awake, when you should be, at your desk, if ever. So it changes everything. And it meant that for a while, there was no routine. There's just self-care and getting support from other people. And that's such an important part of it. But then I have been thinking part of it because it's my job and I have to, start building things back up. How do I do that? And it's got me thinking about all the other times, moving countries, moving jobs, where it feels like everything is new again.
Yeah. So how do you put it back together, especially if what you're putting together is temporary?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I think one of the things is getting used to the idea that you will have to put things back together from the start, because there can be a lot of frustration around that. This idea that this was working and now I have to do it again. There's almost a bit of a frustration that can come with that, and a little bit of that ADHD self-criticism comes back in again. It definitely sort of was something that happened to me rather than something that I, it's, you sort of go, oh, yep. And when I have a baby and then when I finish, I'll, go to work and I'll get work done. And then you realize that's not going to happen. And there's that sense of like, oh, okay, I have to actually get comfortable with the idea this is a job. Coming up with a new routine is going to be the job for a while.
So what have you been coming up with so far?
So it's really around the same things we always talk about when we troubleshoot in coaching, which is the dopamine, the transition times, the working memory, the time blindness and flexibility. Those are kind of the main areas that we're always troubleshooting. So it's been the simple things like transition time's been a huge one. The idea of taking care of my son and then trying to get back to work, but then, oh, he's crying again. So that's not happening. So it's gotten, I ended up having to write a list of things I could do on the couch and a list of things that I could do at my desk and sort of just divide them. So I'm working on one concurrently or another. So the transition times are kind of reduced in that way, rather than saying, oh, okay, I'm trying to do this thing. It's like, okay, what's the smallest, can I just send an email for that task? So location basing my tasks has been something I've had to do.
So let me ask you this. So let's say you're gotten engaged in some kind of work process, a work task, and your baby starts crying. Now we know that with ADHD, like that interruption, like it is now maybe at best a 50-50 chance if we're going to remember where we left off, and to be able to pick it back up. Is there something that you do that makes it easier for you to pick that task back up when you have to go respond to your baby?
Yeah, I've had to really heavily rely on external supports for working memory. And what that essentially means is I've had to write things down as much as possible, as fast as possible, because a lot of it, and for me, I use Monday, but anybody can use whatever system works best for them. The key is that it's something that you can use almost as a log. So as you're working, you've got this kind of log book of what you're doing alongside it, because it's not a case of going, okay, I'm coming to the end of the hour I was working, I'm going to write a list of tasks for next time. That end of time working could happen at any minute. And even though you could quickly write one thing down, you could also just miss that part and have to go straight to taking care of my son.
Well, so let's sort of slow it down and break it down a little bit. So you're there working on a task. Baby starts crying.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do?
The first thing that I do is think about exactly where I am right now and put exactly what I'm doing and what I want to do next into the system that I'm using. So for me, it's Monday. And then I go.
Okay. And I think this is a really important thing to sort of highlight for listeners. It doesn't need to be, responding to a baby. It's insert your interruption here, right? It's like, so often, we think that everything is urgent and an emergency, and we will drop whatever we're doing to go attend to it. And 95% of the time, like, we actually have more time to finish what we're doing than we think. And so for yourself, it sounds like you're taking a minute. So baby's crying.
Yeah.
Take a minute just to capture where you were, where you left off, so you know how to pick it back up. Right?
And I will say occasionally, if I don't have time to write things down, if it's even that fast, I do have a place where I put an audio note. So I'll just press record and I'll say, for me, I'm lucky enough to have an assistant who will listen to that audio note. And I'll say something like, really need to call that person. That's a thing that I need to do. And then I'll leave. So sometimes it could be half a minute.
Yeah. And I just think it's, that ability to just slow down a little bit to capture that, I think is such an important thing when we have that interruption to our workflow. Because, as any parent will tell you, kids don't care at all what's on our calendar.
No, it's really their calendar now.
Yeah. And for this sort of season of life, that's kind of how it should be, right? Like, it doesn't make it less challenging for the ADHD brain, but I do think it can be helpful to remind yourself sometimes that, okay, this is not a forever thing. Like, this is this season in life. And I know, like, when my son was younger, that was something that I found to be very helpful, was to remind myself and to be reminded of the fact that, like, some of the demands of parenting a young child, this is not forever. Like, this time's going to go so fast. So trying to sort of shift expectations a little bit can help with some of the ease in which we are engaging in different things. Yeah.
And also just the routines, when I say we're troubleshooting them, it's not like we're totally throwing everything out and starting from scratch. The things that I developed and taught as part of unconventional organization are still helpful. They just need to be adjusted or reinforced for this period. And then, as my sons become less, dependent and more able to do their own thing, I can start increasing what I put on it. But it's not like I'm going to have to just completely start a totally new system.
So when you're working on helping your clients with routines, what are some of the sort of the foundational or fundamental principles that you're using with your members or your clients with routines, especially when things change?
Mm-hmm. A lot of it has to do with sort of stepping into a routine and setting it up. So we're talking about externalizing it as much as possible, making it so that you don't have to remember the routine is there. You've got those systems, those calendars, those things that are going to help you as scaffolding for those routines, and then adding the dopamine to do them on a consistent basis and adjusting what that might be, because sometimes you think, oh, my dopamine is doing some push-ups, and that isn't what's going to make you do it. Or it might be, people are different.
So how does someone determine how to add the type of dopamine stuff that will work for them?
I mean, a lot of it's experimentation, and it's that spirit of experimentation that actually helps when you need to change up your routines as well. But it's, coming up with, okay, what is it? I often say, if we're talking about morning routines, for example, what will get you out of bed in the morning? And then I say, okay, what will really get you out of bed in the morning?
Interesting. What are some of the different answers you've gotten when you've added that really part to it?
It's playing computer games is a big one. Certain TV shows will do it. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's just sitting in the sun that will do it. Sometimes people have imagine a moment where they're sitting down and they're looking at their journal, or they're reading, and they have a cup of tea and it's sunny outside, and they think, oh, if I could have that moment, I'd get out of bed for that.
What about when someone has their established routine and something unexpected happens? For me, one of my biggest ADHD challenges is transitioning and sort of that mental shifting, right? So for someone like me, who is, especially in my routines, I really depend on my routines to sort of preserve my executive functions. What are some of the ways that you would help people when interruptions when they're in their routine just totally derail them, and they have a hard time adjusting?
It depends on what the interruption is. If you wake up, for example, if we're talking about the morning routine, and you slept in or something's happening, and so now you have half the time that you plan to have, I often recommend right at the beginning that we go in and we set up a very short version of the routine that has the pieces you need. So for example, often with the morning routine, we recommend you do some movement to support your working memory. You have some dopamine to kind of help you get out of bed. And then there's just the general tasks. So it's going, okay, what is that movement? Is it just walking around the house while you brush your teeth? That's it. 2 minutes, you're already brushing your teeth. That's your movement. That still counts. Or is it dopamine, something very, very small? Like if you used to watch a TV show, now you might watch a YouTube video, something like that.
I'm interested in the fact that you're putting like watching a show as one of the dopamine options, because I wonder for a lot of listeners, if yes, maybe that would help them get up. But then what's the cost to have to transition away from that thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. And, some people, that is what they do. They watch a show. In order to transition away from that thing, there's two things. One, that might be a thing you never transition away from, in which case we'll pick something else for your dopamine. But if you are able to do that, we'll often talk about, and I think we talked about this last time, but the idea of dialing down your stimulation rather than shutting it off. So going, okay, I was listening to a show, the show is finished. Can I turn on a podcast? then I can like use that podcast while I get ready, and then maybe I can switch over to music when I leave or something like that. Dialing it down rather than going, now we're going to do nothing.
Yeah, because I know like when, a lot of clients I've worked with and they talk about taking breaks and they're like, yeah, I'm going to take a Facebook break. And I was like, ooh, like that. You are like, you are walking through a minefield right there. Right. Because like, sure, maybe it like recharges you, if you think about like a battery meter, maybe it gives you like a 1 bar like plus. But if the transition away from that depletes you 2 bars, not the best use of a break, not the best way to take a break.
And that definitely, and that is where that experimentation comes in, even just mental experimentation, thinking about what's going to work for you. And we all have those things that we will do for hours and hours, and those are not not the best ones.
Speaking of transitions and breaks, we're going to take one right now. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from the members of our award-winning coaching community. Learn more at coachingrewired.com. Our winter season is already in its second week, which means we are already gearing up to start registration for our next season, our spring season of coaching and accountability groups. You can learn more at coachingrewired.com. Do you have every intention of fulfilling all your New Year's aspirations? Do you still remember what they are? Are you wondering how you'll keep that new year excitement and momentum going? Have you tried hacks and tips and strategy after strategy, only to be left feeling overwhelmed and unsure of what to do next? If you're ready to learn new skills or enhance the strategies you already have to live better with your ADHD, reframe what consistency can look like for you, get supportive accountability from like-brained people just like you, and you're ready to create your new roadmap to move closer to your biggest goals, join us. That's coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our spring interest list so you can stay up to date for when we launch our spring registration kickoff event and to stay in touch about the dates for our upcoming spring sessions. Stop trying harder and start working smarter if you're ADHD, because we can do hard things and we don't have to do them alone, and we don't have to do them in the hardest way possible. Unless that's your jam, then you do you. But if it's not, go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com.
That was a great transition.
Thanks. All right, we are back. All right, so I want to share, I think before I hit record, I'll tell you that there's a story I wanted to share with you about troubleshooting around a routine when things change. And I'm sharing this because it was very recent. This was just this past weekend. So my ex and I, we co-parent, so we have 50-50 custody. And so a couple weeks ago, I had agreed to swap weekends with my ex. And so I forgot to look at my calendar this weekend on Saturday. And so I get a call from my ex, and she says, are you home? And I was like, why? She goes, well, based on what's in your garage, I see that one of your motorcycles isn't there. Are you not home? And I was like, why are you in my garage? Like, don't you remember you have Gibson today? We switched. And as soon as she said that, I was like, I remember that now. And I'm she calls me, it's 10 a.m. and I'm in the city with my partner. So there's part of me that goes, oh crap, I screwed up, and owning it and being apologetic. She's like, well, okay, so when can you be here? And I'm like, so I couldn't even answer that at first because I was like, let me just call you back in 5 minutes. Like my brain is like locks, right? Where I'm just like, I can't even compute thoughts right now. And so I called her back, and I was, told her like it'll be like, maybe about 2 hours. And as I was going through this, and I know that kind of quick shift for me has always been something I really have always struggled with. But it was just so frustrating because I was thinking, okay, like here it is. Like, thankfully that she was able to stay with my son for a little while until I was able to get back into the suburbs. But like, I was frustrated the fact that like, okay, so what if she wasn't able to, and I had to like, rapidly grab my stuff and go. Where like, because part of me wanted to be able to do that, to rapidly grab my stuff and go. And it was like that experience of like the invisible wall that we sometimes feel like when we have ADHD of like, I know what I need to be doing things. Like the idea of actually initiating and getting started on this feels like not just hard, but like not even possible. Right. And so I had to go through my routine of having my breakfast, having my coffee, going to the bathroom, like doing the things that I always do in the morning until I was like, okay, now I could pack up and go and get my son. I was trying to, not beat myself up too much about that, but I was still frustrated that thing has been such a struggle for me throughout my life. So it's like, what do you do? Like, how do you problem solve those in the moment sort of situations where you have to act quickly and shift when your brain is not cooperating?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And it's worth mentioning as well, the emotional dysregulation piece, because, we know that that's something people with ADHD struggle with. And that also can be an aspect that comes in, there's a lot of flooding, and that takes, executive functioning struggles that are already so hard just offline for a little while. And so sometimes it's about supporting that as well. So thinking about, what can you do as just like a little reset around that kind of thing, to sort of go, okay, this is where I am. This is how I'm feeling. I'm going to just take a minute. I'm going to talk to somebody if I can, that just, say, this is where I'm at, or I'm going to write it down or something, just to kind of get that, help move through that sort of emotional dysregulation. And then sort of thinking through that routine and going, what's the shortest version of it I can possibly do right now?
And it's interesting too, because when I think about emotional dysregulation, I think we often like think about sort of an externalized dysregulation. And I think that sometimes emotional dysregulation is a very internalized thing, like that act of like when your sort of brain freezes, like that is a dysregulation.
Yeah, totally. And it can happen a lot, and it's something that thankfully there's more and more research coming out about it. There's more and more people talking about it. Hopefully it'll be in the diagnosis soon.
Or it will hopefully return to the diagnosis soon.
Yes, exactly. No, that's a very good point.
It used to be, and in the 60s and 70s when all the behavioral scientists were trying to say, we're a real science, we can measure our stuff, and oh wait, emotion's hard to measure, so let's just take that one out. And that's literally like why it has not been in there for the last 40 some years.
It's crazy. I'm always talking on the podcast about how much we'd be curious to see what the next DSM version is going to be, if it's going to be included. But apparently it's unlikely that the DSM will come out for a while, the next version, because of so many changes that have happened. But yeah, for now, we talk about emotional dysregulation as much as possible, as I'm sure you do as well, just to kind of let people know it's a thing.
Yeah, it is definitely a thing. All right, what about for when we're dealing with your clients? So when we think about routines, there are so many things during the day that most people do every day. Where do you help people like focus on in routines? If, let's say someone comes to you and they're like, I have no routines at all. Where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. That actually happened to me a couple of weeks ago. It's often about finding a hook. And generally speaking, that's somewhere in the morning. It doesn't always happen to be, but there'll be something you'll tend to do semi-regularly, like whether it's brushing your teeth is an example, or not. Sometimes that's not a thing, but there might be an event you have to go to. I have worked with some people who have absolutely nothing that is regular from week to week. And in that case, we've started with something like kind of reducing the transitions between tasks and putting things on the calendar to reduce time blindness, and then worked our way towards the routines from that direction. But for a lot of people, it's about finding that one thing that you do semi-regularly.
How important do you think it is for people to know really specifically how long each part of the routine takes them?
I'm not a huge stickler for how many minutes it takes. I think of it more like a dance. You want to know kind of the flow is, and you want to know when you have to leave, for example, when you have to be somewhere. If you're going to figure out how long things take, you might find out that it takes you about the same time as it takes to boil whatever you make in the morning to do a particular task. And so that task might just be a cup of tea's time. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be a specific timed event. It just needs to have some kind of flow to it.
I guess the reason I was curious about what your thoughts were on that is one of the things that we do in my coaching program is really help people both the act of predicting and then tracking how long different tasks take. And we introduce that component to their like morning and evening routines as part of an introductory part to daily and weekly planning. Because like if there are certain activities that we are, no matter what, and no matter what order it's done in, these things are going to be happening. So let's build around the routines. So I look at these as what I call these are the knowables, right? Like you might not know right now, but it is knowable how long it takes to make a certain breakfast, and how long it takes to clean up that breakfast, and how long does it take to get dressed or shower, and am I having to do my hair or not do my hair? Like so, really learning how long those things actually take, I have found to be extremely, extremely important. You're saying that you're not finding that as much, or what?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So what we tend to do is we will go through often, initially just say, okay, well, how long would this take? How long would this take? Okay, you've got about 2 hours. And so you'll have sort of that time on the calendar. So we talk a lot about putting that time on the calendar so that you then understand, oh, instead of a whole day to do this task, I have a couple of hours in the afternoon between thing A and thing B. It really depends on how much time you have. The reason that we don't necessarily get people to time everything is just because there's often a lot of resistance around that. And usually this is the very first thing that we're doing. Sometimes people will need to go back in and do it in more depth, but at that point they sort of have got their sea legs, as it were, for how the system works and are much more confident doing that.
Exactly. For me, I think that part of that is also building that skill of building time wisdom, right? Where it's wisdom is like it's applied knowledge. And so it's like, we can look at those specific tasks, but let's not skip that step of let's guess first how long we think it takes. Which is, it's often a very humbling thing to do. But like it doesn't help us to keep our head buried in the sand. And I find that for a lot of our folks that go through our program, that when they start doing this tracking and the prediction with the tracking, they discover a pretty reliable sort of delta between what they predict and what it actually is. And then you can generalize, like, okay, so when I think something is going to take me 30 minutes, like when every part of my soul is like 30 minutes, no way it's more. And I've tracked it and it's an hour and a half every time. So I sort of use that, like, okay, when my gut says this, I know this typically actually means that.
That's a really, really good point. Yeah, I love that. And it is so much about learning to think, like getting these skills and then having them become a part of your life. Like what you're talking about is just almost like a new vocabulary. And I think that's the amazing thing about being a part of the ADHD community and getting the support is you can start to, so many of my clients are like, well, I was doing this and I was doing that. And then I thought of you, especially when we've been doing it for years. And I thought, actually, it's like this, and kind of like being able to start to think in a different way.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break because my brain just went, I forgot what we're talking about, which to me is a great time for us to take a quick break. So we'll reconvene and we will be right back. Please note, this ad may not be appropriate for younger or more sensitive listeners. All right, it is that time again for an ad for something that doesn't exist. Hey there, ADHD rewired aficionados. Do you ever feel like your ADHD brain is a wild circus of distractions and overreactions? Buckle up. because we've got we've got a ludicrous, buckle up, because we have a ludicrously buckle up, because we have a ludicrously whimsical solution. Introducing the zany and utterly fantastical Focus Pill, the dual action brain bonanza. Behold, Focus Pill Action 1. This isn't just a pill, it's a magic bean of motivation. Have a boring task that you'd rather watch paint dry than do? Swallow an Action 1 and bam! You're now an unstoppable whirlwind of productivity, possibly accompanied by dramatic theme music and inexplicable cape wearing. But wait, the absurdity escalates with Focus Pill Action 2. This little gem is like a mental broom, sweeping away those cobwebs of overthinking. Anxious about what your cat thinks of you? Paranoid that your favorite ADHD podcaster can read your thoughts while you listen to their voice? Pop an Action 2 and poof, your mind becomes as serene as a cucumber wearing sunglasses in a hammock. Together, these twin titans of Focus Pill bring a cartoonish equilibrium to your ADHD life. It's like having a mental remote control with a more care and less care button. Also available in an easy-to-use suppository for those who truly struggle to give a shit. This is your chance to literally give your shit something that helps you give a shit. Just... But remember, Focus Pill is as real as unicorns playing laser tag. It's all a jest. For real, genuine ADHD strategies, chat with a real-life, less whimsical healthcare professional or ADHD coach. All right, they can be whimsical, but just make sure that they know what the hell they are talking about. Or you can reach out to someone right here at ADHD reWired. Whether it's our free Facebook community, our virtual co-working community at adultstudyhall.com, or our coaching and accountability groups that you can learn more about at coachingrewired.com. I was actually distracted by how do I get this this sun like beam that's coming right through my blinds so give me 1 second.
It's all good.
I'm distracted by the bright shiny thing in the sky.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Now that you've said it, I'm like, oh, I can see it.
All right, we are back. So, Skye, why do you think that actually like remembering these routines and doing these routines is actually so hard?
Well, the thing is with ADHD, we struggle with working memory. And so no matter how excited we are on Thursday to try a routine on a Monday, by the time it gets to Monday, sometimes we forget routines exist. And so I've had a lot of people come back a week later or 2 weeks later and say, oh yeah, that was what as we started this call, I realized I was supposed to be looking at my routines and I didn't because I totally forgot that I even did it. It's not in your long-term memory yet.
Yeah. You know, one of the things in the last, I think just like year or two, I've shifted is one of the questions that I ask. I used to ask people, how will you remember that? And what I've done is I've shifted the way I ask that question because it's not about remembering it. It's about being reminded of it. So I now ask, how will you be reminded of that? Because I think the former question, how will you remember, assumes it's going to come organically internally, which is like
that's
good,
so true. Right?
It's like good luck. Like so you must be a gambler then because you're gambling. If that's actually going to work, right? But when we learn how to cue ourselves and create those point and performance reminders, that's when we start to actually develop the scaffolding and strategies in our environment. So, what are some of the ways that you've seen, whether it's yourself personally or people that you've worked with, use reminders and cues to cue them about their routines? So
yeah, there's so many different ways. And with AI and different home systems, like we're going to call it Lexi, there's lots of different ways for people to do it. And people in my community are always coming up with new ways, which is amazing. I think one of the ways that I've found helpful and I've used with clients before is if you have a watch that has reminders in it. If you can integrate that with your calendar, that can be amazing. So it can be like a little buzz reminder that just says, oh, in 5 minutes, this is happening. In 10 minutes, this is happening. That can be really helpful. Sometimes it's as old school as, oh, you're in the kitchen. There's a thing on the fridge that has like googly eyes on it so that it moves when you open the fridge, and it's got your task list for that day that you just made up on it, something like that.
I don't know why I never thought of getting large googly eyes for my fridge. Like I think that I'm gonna go impulsively buy a big pair of googly eyes for my fridge after we're done here.
It's something about the movement. Like we'll miss the brightest thing, but if it moves, we're like, oh, what was that?
Well, and I'll tell you. So I've been using smart light cues in different ways. You know, one of the things that I do on Mondays and Tuesdays, I have to go pick up my son by 5:30, and so at 5 o'clock, the lights in my office will turn green.
That's awesome,
and not red. Because here's my thinking behind this: stopping takes time. I need to start green, the stopping process.
That's great. I love that. And when you're coming up with a new routine, spending as much time thinking about how you'll be reminded is almost as important, because you can come up with the best routine, but relying on yourself to remember it with working memory struggles, that's really tough.
You know, I'm going to be presenting at the CHAD conference, and maybe by the time this comes out, I presented at the CHAD conference, and it's on AI and smart tools. And part of what I'm looking at is some of the things with the smart speakers like Lexi. And within that particular app, they have all of these pre-made routines that are truly like brilliant.
Yeah.
Like there's one where you can have it tell you every 30 minutes between like two different times. So say between 7 and 9 o'clock, every 30 minutes announce the time. Like,
yeah,
you know,
that's
so it's
been
like,
really helpful for a lot of people. Yeah. Sometimes even that just reminds you have a routine that you've just set up.
Yeah. Or there's another one that it can activate, say it'll turn on the radio or announce the weather if you snooze your alarm.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so there's,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So there's so many of these cool things. Another one I think is really cool is that if you happen to maybe fall asleep on the couch or maybe like in your bed, but you didn't actually turn your lights off, if Lexi detects snoring, it will turn the lights off for you.
Okay, that's a lot. They're listening to you snore. Oh my gosh.
You know, it's pattern recognition. I mean, that's what AI is.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because as I've been looking at some of the ethical things around AI, and I know for a lot of people it kind of it scares that, right? But it really is pattern recognition. And when people are like, no, I don't want anything to do with AI, and I'm like, oh, so you have spell check turned off? Because spell check is a form of AI. You know, your Spotify playlist, that those recommended songs that pop up,
does know.
That's AI, right? It's pattern recognition. Yeah. So yes, I don't want to say don't worry about the privacy stuff, but there are some really powerful ways to use technology to help with the routines. Like if you time it out and pace it out, you can have your Lexi or your other smart speaker announce where you should be in your routine.
Yeah, it's interesting. And a lot of people in our community are saying, yep, give it to me, all of the tech, all of the AI. I feel like with ADHD, sometimes we're almost perfectly primed to take advantage of these things because we're already thinking about our routines and our new systems and trying things. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. I had I was demonstrating something to my alumni community, and one of the people on my team said, like, you were like so excited about this AI tool. They're like, why are they going to need coaching if there's AI? And I very genuinely thought deeply like all week about that particular question. And it's like, I think what AI will do is it's going to make that the bridge between intention and action even easier. But it's still, at the end of the day, ADHD is not a skill deficit, right? It's a problem with action. And so it will make some of the cognitive processes easier with AI, but you still have to take the action, right? And that's where I think coaching it will absolutely still be a valuable service.
And you still have to troubleshoot it. When things come along, you still have to troubleshoot it. I had to troubleshoot it, and I'm the one running this.
Yeah, and it's most, I think, people in the ADHD space who are doing coaching also have ADHD themselves. So what do you share with your members about and your clients around like some of the your own challenges and how you approach the problem solving process?
Yeah, I think often I tend to just be transparent around what is happening. So, for example, there's a bunch of writing that I need to do for a new workbook, and plan to go to my desk and write it the way I usually do. And because I just had my son, I was like, that's not happening. There's no amount of time that I can do, and sit down and get into focus. And so I had to get out my Remarkable that I'd had for a while and hadn't used, and be like, okay, let's do this, on the couch, figure out how to do that, translate it into voice, writing it, translating it into text, and editing it with a much smaller time window. So it's just sharing that, being like, hey, this is what I did recently, and seeing what other people have done, and co-developing systems.
So do you think it's even worthwhile for someone like yourself to capture the routines that you had before your son was born, knowing that several years, the option might be to go back to how you were doing things. Do you think that's even worthwhile to do, or do you think that context will probably be different a few years from now?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that it's really useful to capture the principles behind the systems that I used. So we talk about the get in focus routine. We talked about that last time. That's something that was very, very helpful when I was sitting at my desk. It's helpful when I'm sitting on a couch, but it's more difficult. But the tech that I use to turn off notifications, to write notes, that's going to probably be different. Even if, by the time we get there, who knows what kind of thing is going to be used. But the systems of dialing down dopamine and transitioning into work, that will probably still be the same.
So I remember at the start of the pandemic, one of the things I was encouraging people to do was to, if you have an established routine and it's all changing, write down what you were doing. So when the world opens back up again, that you can defer back to that. But, as time has gone on, we are not the same people years.
I was just saying, I'd be really curious, go to work, sit in traffic.
Historians and archaeologists are going to find these kinds of things. And people used to do that.
You have to stay until 5. There is no hybrid.
Oh my gosh. So what else do you think is important for people to know around, troubleshooting routines when things change?
I think it's important, outside of, are you thinking about working memory? Are you thinking about time blindness and dopamine and flexibility and transition times? I think overall, it's good to think about this as a constant learning and experimentation process, and embrace that. Not necessarily to say you're going to throw everything out every time, but sort of get comfortable with the idea that you're consistently going to be iterating what you're doing. Your life is an experiment in some way in terms of productivity, rather than I did it, I got the routine, that's it, we're done.
Right. And also the idea that we can't go on autopilot. We try to, and we're like, oh, I don't know when things fell off, but it's I had this routine and now I don't even know what happened. Right. That can be a frustrating part. A number of years ago, one of the ahas that I had, because I had fallen out of my workout routine after going to a conference, and it just slipped away.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the things that I took away from that was when I go to a conference, I have to find the workout facility there, because I have to maintain that very deliberately. And when I moved to my current house, when I moved a couple of years ago, and I was exhausted. I mean, the move was just kind of awful. But weeks ahead of time, with this in mind, I was like, I don't care how tired I am. My first morning I wake up there, I'm working out.
Yeah.
Because I know being in a new environment, all of our cues are gone. And so we have to reestablish those.
It's funny you should talk about working out and movement, because obviously having a baby, that just disappears. And so if you do have to get back into it, and I say this as somebody who currently is, it's about coming up with the smallest possible version of that and going it's just 10 minutes, or it's just a walk, or whatever it is, and we'll build on it. But yeah, if you can keep it in some way, traveling, all those kinds of things. That's so helpful as well. Just keep that thread going.
All right. So I think that is all the time we have for today. So Skye, tell people where they can reach you and anything else you want to share about what kind of contact info and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me at unconventionalorganization.com. We have the ADHD Skills Lab podcast, where we talk about the latest research and have really interesting discussions with wonderful people like yourself. We have the ADHD Academy, which is a community of people who support each other, ADHD adults, help build momentum, get tasks done, hold each other accountable. And we also have, if you want more support in terms of one-on-one coaching, we have limited opportunities for you to do one-on-one coaching with our ADHD coaches. So lots to do, and it's all at Unconventional Organization.
Awesome. Skye, thank you so much, and continued best of success and luck, and enjoy being mom. As I'm sure you know, it goes so fast.
Yes, thanks so much. Yeah, and I will.
All right, thanks. And that's the end of this week's episode. Thank you, Skye, for joining me on today's show. If you want to get in touch or grab any of the resources mentioned in today's show, head on over to ADHD rewired.com/podcast to find it all. Do you have any tips or tricks about troubleshooting routines you'd like to share? Why not check out our free Facebook community at ADHDrewired.com/community, where you can apply and check out all of the resources and awesome conversations that are happening over there. If you want to hone in on your routines, but don't want to work on planning alone, why not check out our online ADHD-friendly co-working community at adultstudyhall.com. It is still free to try for the first week, and it's only $19.99 a month after that. Then if you are looking for a taste of group coaching, patrons at just $25 a month can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month for our monthly coaching call. That means if you are listening to this early enough on the day it came out, our patrons at $25 a month or more can join me today at 3 p.m. Central to do some problem solving on one of your ADHD related issues. Otherwise, if you're looking for an ad-free experience of the show with the show announcements at the end instead of in the middle, patrons at $5 a month or more can find an uninterrupted listening experience of this podcast over there. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Want to find anything ADHD Rewired? Get the show notes, learn about our coaching groups, learn about our coaches, find events, and more, all at ADHDrewired.com. One more time, thanks again to Skye for chatting with me today. And thank you to all of our listeners, supporters, guests, and community members for tuning in and helping to continue to make this show possible. That's all for now, and we will see you next week.